All right, so let's go and jump into it. My name is Mark Phillip, and I'm an application engineer with Studica Incorporated. A little bit about Studica. We're a reseller of software and hardware products, and we primarily deal with educational institutions, students, faculty. We do K through 12, higher education, pretty much anything in the educational sector. We've been doing it for a little over 30 years, and today we're going to be talking about a language learning program called Babbel. It's a software platform. And we'll basically be looking at some of the data around bilingualism and language learning currently, mostly in the United States. And then we'll also talk about kind of what that means for students entering the modern global economy. And then we'll also look at some of the current language trends. And then we'll take a look at what Babbel is, and I'll kind of go through a quick demonstration. And we'll talk about some more specifics about the program. So my contact information is here on this slide if you need to contact me for any reason. And our website is studica.com. And you can find all of our offerings on our site. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and jump to the first section. This is kind of a bit of a roadmap here, what we'll be looking at. So we're going to kind of talk first about the increasing number of bilingual speakers in the United States. One thing I will mention is most of my data that I have is related to the United States. So if you are in like Canada or a different country, some of this data may not quite apply to you, but it still might be interesting for you. We're also going to look at language requirements in higher education and kind of how that's affecting K-12 and how it's affecting student academic goals in the college sector. We're going to talk about the global economy and the idea of globalization, which I'll define and discuss more when we get there, and basically how this is changing job requirements for new employees and things like that. And one note at the bottom that I'm not really going to discuss, but I think is worth mentioning, is the health and well-being side of bilingualism and multilingualism. There's actually a lot of research in this realm currently. Many linguists and psychologists are doing a lot of research on this topic. The upshot is that people who are bilingual and multilingual in general see cognitive benefits, especially related to things like dementia and memory, especially in older age. I won't really go into it too in depth, but I do recommend if that's kind of interesting to you. There's a lot of research out there. It's definitely worth a quick Google and see if you find some information that you find interesting. So that's one aspect of bilingualism and language learning that I think a lot of people kind of don't focus on, especially in the context when we're talking about career goals and salaries and things like that. So the first kind of thing I want to look at is the trend of bilingualism in the United States. So what this data is showing us is the projection of the population that's 5 years and older that are speaking a language other than English at home. We have data from 2010, 2015, 2020. Basically, we're seeing this steady increase. These numbers are in the millions, by the way. So by 2020, we're projecting 71.8 million people, essentially, who are speaking a language other than English at home. Who are 5 years and older. That's quite a sizable number. I believe, do some quick math in my head, that's about, 1/5 of the population of the country. So this increase in bilingualism is going to partly drive more bilingualism, right? It's going to drive more people to learn more languages and become more interested in these other languages as we end up conversing with more and more people who do speak multiple languages. So it is going to drive that demand, and a lot of that demand is going to have to be supplied by schools and education institutions where people are going to learn these skills. This data is from the U.S. Census Bureau, so it is reputable as far as I'm aware. So that's kind of an interesting trend currently. We'll also look at language requirements for a little bit. When we talk about language requirements, what we're referring to is largely colleges that have some kind of requirement for you to take language courses in order to get a degree. So approximately 50% of higher education institutions in the U.S. Have some kind of language requirement that comes from the Modern Language Association, which is basically a group that does all sorts of statistics and data analytics on language learning and things like that in the United States. So what this means for people in K-12, or teachers, I guess, in K-12 is we can better be preparing our students for college life by getting them started early with language learning. And lots of the research has basically shown that the younger you start kids learning another language, the better they are at adapting to it and maintaining that language. And even the better they are at things like pronunciation and accents. As you get older, it becomes significantly harder for people to learn another language, especially things like pronunciation and getting that right. So in K-12, it's important to be starting children earlier rather than later on learning a second language. And this will help them in their college life because, as we'll see right now, an increasing number of colleges are basically requiring you to take some kind of foreign language to get a degree. And this is spread across every type of degree, not just your doctor's or master's, not just your graduate degrees, right? Even your associate's degree is seeing an increased number of campuses requiring you take some kind of international global learning outcome. And that's what we're seeing here is basically between 2006, 2011, how that's changed. I couldn't find more recent data, but all the projections I've been seeing are saying that it's only going up. It's only increasing. So that's kind of the idea of language requirements in the college sector and why that's important for students to be learning language earlier rather than later and getting them ready for actually getting their degrees and going through these programs. So that's kind of the current trend in the United States about how language learning is kind of evolving and how bilingualism is increasing. But let's look kind of at the economic side of things for a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about globalization. And for people who may not know, globalization is basically the idea of trade barriers kind of crumbling and everybody in the world doing trade with each other. And so, we do trade now with countries all around the world, and we have multinational corporations and people operating all over the world. It's no longer like this, this island economy or whatever, where you're just trading with each other domestically. We're now trading internationally, and there's a lot of job growth here. And this phenomena is driving a lot of demand for bilingual speakers, for employees who can speak multiple languages. And what this figure is showing us is a number of online job listings for workers with bilingual skills between 2010 and 2015. And we see in 2015 that number's pretty much doubled, more than doubled, as far as people who are looking for individuals with bilingual skills. And I do like to point out that this data, I didn't read the entire paper. I don't know if they're controlling for the fact that between 2010 and 2015, there's probably more online job sites, so there's more online postings. So that is one bit of the data to maybe keep in mind, that this number might be a bit smaller if you control for that factor. What's really interesting, though, that we'll see on the next page is basically that this demand is actually spread across all types of jobs. So low-wage, high-wage workers, like middle-class workers. We're seeing across all these sectors an increase in employers looking for bilingual individuals or multilingual individuals. And this is largely being driven by emerging economies who are having huge GDP growth and who are opening up their markets to trade, and there's like booming business happening. So these companies need individuals who know how to navigate the cultures of these countries as well as be able to communicate with people effectively. So these stats are kind of showing us what I just described. The figure on the left is the change in share of jobs targeting bilingual workers between 2010 and 2015, and it's split up by prestige. Now, prestige is kind of, I want to say, an abstract measurement. It's essentially how people perceive the prestige of a certain job. So for an example, like a neurosurgeon would probably be a really high prestige, right? Most people you talk to would hold a neurosurgeon at like a really high prestige level. Whereas most people might look at somebody like a fast food worker as a lower prestige, right? So that's kind of how this is split up. And so they look at the percentage change between 2010 and 2015 of these types of jobs, and whether or not they're looking for bilingual workers. And so we've seen across every spectrum here that more and more places are looking for bilingual workers across every type of industry, essentially. On the right, what we're seeing is the employers with the largest share of bilingual listings as of 2015. Most of these are going to be like Fortune 500 multinational corporations. As we look, we see Bank of America, H&R Block, Humana. A lot of them are going to be banks, insurance company, and telecommunications or data carriers like T-Mobile and AT&T, largely because these are the kind of industries that are going into, emerging markets, right? Emerging markets need people to hold their money. They're going to need insurance. They're going to need new infrastructure to build telecommunications data networks with. So these big multinational corporations are largely looking for a lot more bilingual people to work within these markets. So kind of the upshot of the whole thing is that people who are bilingual or multilingual actually have an edge in the employment process. If you put on your resume that you speak multiple languages, you're automatically going to look better to a prospective employer than somebody who only speaks a single language. Of course, it depends on other factors, right? That's not like the only thing these people are looking for, but it does give you an edge, especially depending on what kind of job you're actually looking to do. So let's look at kind of the current trends in language learning. There's three big ones that when I was researching that I kind of came across: blended learning, immersive learning, and distance learning. And so we'll kind of look at all three of these and talk a bit about them. So the immersion approach, language immersion rather, is increasingly popular in recent times, actually. Currently, 448 schools use this approach. And what the approach is the idea is that when you go into your class, say I'm trying to learn Spanish and I'm taking a Spanish course, I'm going to go into my class and I'm going to be expected to speak only Spanish, not speak any English at all. The instruction might be given to me in Spanish. I'm going to have to converse with my classmates in Spanish as well as I can, have normal conversations, right? And this kind of focus came around because most of the linguistics research has found that people who just converse in the language, like everyday kind of monotonous dialogue, they're more likely to remember because they're actually using it for something they're kind of interested in, or they see some kind of use for it, right? So you might go talk to your classmate, like, say, hello, how are you doing? And what did you eat for breakfast this morning, right? Something really simple, but you're going to be doing it in Spanish, right? Or whatever language you're learning. And the idea is that by doing that, you get used to having a normal conversation. You're going to pick up on how to say certain words, how to use the proper grammar and things like that. Now, that's not to say that there's not going to be, in my case, I'm taking a Spanish course. It's not to say that there's only going to be Spanish and the teacher will not speak English to me. If you are struggling or maybe you have a question, that is a time when maybe the teacher will speak to you in English to clarify something, right? But the idea is to try and immerse you in it and to try and get you to really focus on constantly speaking it. And it's less focused on memorization and more focused on normal conversation. The immersive approach often also does cultural learning, where you might be studying things related to the culture of the people who primarily speak that language, right? And so it helps kind of get your students a little more cultured as well at the same time. Like I said, this approach is increasingly popular, and the graph here basically shows us the adoption since 1971. And the big tick I see is from 2006 to 2011. We almost doubled the number of schools that are doing this. This approach is really popular in Europe right now too, where multilingual education is really emphasized in almost every European Union country. Many of them are using language immersion to great success. So with that, we'll look at blended learning. This approach basically takes face-to-face instruction with a distance learning or online learning element. So kind of what might be called a hybrid class. So in this approach, you might have students go to class 3 days a week, and then 2 days a week they stay at home and do some kind of assignment or something like that. What's interesting with this approach is you can teach it however you want. Maybe when they go to class, you employ the immersive method, right? And when they go home, you're going to have them maybe hop on some kind of software like Babbel and have them complete lessons and things like that, right? And track their progress. What's interesting with blended learning and distance learning as well, which we'll talk about on the next slide, is basically that students in general report that they retain information better in this environment, and that they prefer it because it's a more flexible schedule for them. And I think this is especially big in college, where students might be working or may have family and things like that they have to take care of. Having blended learning or distance learning really helps create flexible schedules for them. Many students also report that they are more engaged in the material, that they retain the information better, and that they are more likely to finish homework and things like that. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know why that is necessarily, and we have to remember that students telling us that, so maybe there's a little bit of bias there, but it is kind of an interesting phenomenon. So with that, let's look at distance learning. So this is kind of a step removed from blended learning, where blended learning combines face-to-face with distance, whereas distance is all online, right? This is the idea that you don't actually go to a classroom. You can be at home, connect online to your school system and do your class lesson or watch lectures, whatever you're doing. Some interesting stat I found was that by 2019, at least 50% of the classes in college are expected to be delivered online. In my experience, in my research, a lot of these courses I think are general ed classes, of which many of those would probably be language classes, if I had to guess. And the big reason for this is because the cost of providing online courses is really cheap. It saves you on facilities costs, right? And it saves, basically the fact that it is cheaper helps bring down tuition for the students, which is a really big deal currently with the student debt crisis looming, right? And so many schools are starting to do this, and it is increasingly popular, but there is a different story in K-12. There's a much slower adoption, I should say, of distance learning in the K-12 sector. My best guess for that is probably because public schools at least have a lot of rules and standards they have to adhere to, and so just implementing like a full online system is probably a lot harder to do. So some of the stats, I'm not going to go through all of these stats here, but the upshot of what you see at the bottom is basically that public schools are a little more slow to adopt to it, but there are more and more schools starting to do this. So those are kind of the big approaches currently for delivering language learning content. So with that being said, let's take a look at what Babbel actually is. Basically, it's an online language learning platform and a mobile app. It is heavily used in education, and they focus more on building real-life conversation skills. So they try not to focus so much on definitions and memorization. Those things are still there, but they try to put it in the context of like an actual conversation, right? It uses the language that you currently speak to basically teach you the new stuff. So I speak English. If I want to learn Spanish, they're going to deliver the content to me. They'll say, like, choose the correct translation in English, right? To give me instructions on what I'm supposed to do, but then everything else will be in Spanish. And they focus on all the skills. So they look at listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And we'll kind of see that when I demonstrate this. And there's 8,500 hours of content in 14 different languages. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the program just so you can see it. Now, the one thing I want to start off with is that Babbel is like highly portable. It's not an actual program you install on your computer, which is actually really nice for education. The reason that's nice is because basically if you have a computer that connects to the internet and can get to this website, you can use it. So this makes it highly portable for many devices, mobile devices, Windows, Linux, Mac, Chromebooks, whatever. Like, as long as you can get to this website, you can access the content because nothing's being installed on the computer. So right now I'm just in my Chrome browser. I'm on a PC, but I'm in my Chrome browser and I'm on the website. And so I'm logged into my account and I'm set to do Spanish. And so we'll kind of, let me look at my courses here. It will keep track of my progress, and that progress is going to be synced across all my different devices because it's all associated with my one account, right? So I'm logged into my account, and so it tracks my progress through my account. So in the Spanish, we have a number of different like Spanish courses. There's new content. So this is basically new stuff that Babbel's created recently related to Spanish you could check out. There's beginners courses, which is probably what I'm going to do because I'm very much so a beginner. There's a grammar course, focuses on, like it sounds, grammar. Intermediate courses, kind of for mid-level people who maybe are decent with Spanish but looking to improve. Lessons focused on listening and speaking, so more of the pronunciation and understanding, right? Maybe working on your accent and things like that. Lessons related to countries and traditions, so kind of more cultural related, but you're still learning Spanish as you do these. Special stuff that's basically, as they describe it, like idioms and practice numbers and things like that. And then words and sentences. So basically there's a lot of different things in here you can kind of look at and explore. So I'm going to click on beginner's course, and the little green dot next to 1 means I've finished this one. So I'm going to look at beginner's course 2, and I'll click on this. And in here I have a number of different lessons that I can choose. So I think there's quite a few in here. There's like 20 or something. So I'm just going to do part 1. And, I'm going to go beginner's course 1. The green circle in beginner's course 1 means this is the course I left off on, not that I completed it. The check mark here means I completed this lesson. So then maybe I'll go to part 2. And so I'm going to hit start. And it's going to ask me to enable my microphone. So you can basically do with or without speech recognition. Generally, we do recommend the speech recognition because pronunciation is really important when learning a second language. It's often one of the harder things for people to learn. So by making sure you do that, you're going to help yourself. So I'm going to do this, and then it's going to basically ask me to repeat words back to the program. And so you're going to hear my really poor Spanish right now, and try not to laugh at me too hard.
Mucho gusto.
Mucho gusto.
Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. So kind of like what just happened basically is that we're seeing an image that is trying to kind of relate what the phrase is, right? It's a pleasure is like two people meeting each other. See you soon is like two people shaking hands like they're leaving. Good morning shows us this kind of picture of a morning. So they're trying to reinforce the written and the phonetic with the visual there. So it's kind of like a memorization method. We also see the English definition and then the Spanish translation. And then the speaker speaks it to us, and then we have to speak it back. And the word analyzer is actually trying to listen for your pronunciation as well. So you do want to say roll your R's, right? And you do want to be trying to say it the way that the speaker is saying it, or else it's going to tell you you're wrong. One thing I will mention is the person who's saying the words initially, they are native speakers. So they're people whose Spanish is their first language, right? So they have a proper accent and everything like that. So you're not hearing somebody who's maybe second or third language who may not have the completely accurate accent. So let's move to the next one. So this is kind of reinforcing the same couple words, and they're telling me to choose the correct translation for mucho gusto, which I believe was it's a pleasure.
Mucho gusto.
Yeah, so I click on that, and they tell me what it is again. Hasta pronto is see you
Hasta
soon.
pronto.
Buenos dias is good
Buenos
morning.
días.
And then buenas tardes is
Buenas
good afternoon,
tardes.
evening. Then we continue. So here's kind of the written aspect. So how do I say it's a pleasure? I would do mucho gusto. So I can type that in. If you're on mobile, you're going to see the same kind of interface, and you can tap on these letters to fill it out. See you soon is hasta pronto, I believe.
Hasta pronto.
Yeah. Good morning is going to be buenos dias. And they provide the, they provide the little squiggly eye for me. I don't know what you call that.
Buenos días.
We don't have that generally on standard English keyboards, so they provide that for you. And then I can say buenas tardes for the last one, right?
Buenas tardes.
And so I hit continue. And then they do this one, which is kind of like dialogue conversation. So it's kind of like a text message conversation, and they want you to fill out certain things, right? So this is like, how do I say good morning, Carlos? Well, Carlos is filled in, so I'll put good morning, which will be buenos dias. Let me grab the squiggly eye.
Buenos días, Carlos.
And then somebody responds, good afternoon, Jorge, is already noon. So I have to put in good afternoon. And you'll notice they're pretty much only telling me to fill out words that I've learned up to this point, whereas stuff like ya es mediodía is filled out for me.
Buenas tardes, Jorge. Ya es mediodía.
And then yes, it's late, and you are, so I have C. So that was one I learned in a previous
Sí, ya es
lesson,
tarde.
right? Which is yes.
¿Y usted es?
And then here for she, I would say ella.
Ella es mi esposa.
And then hello, I'm Claudia, so I would say hola, and I would do yo soy.
Hola, yo soy Claudia.
And it's a pleasure, I would fill out mucho gusto.
Mucho gusto. Yo soy Jorge.
Encantada.
And then there's stuff like this where they throw phrases at you and things you might not have seen yet, and then they kind of talk about them as well. And then see you soon, I'd fill out hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto.
And then bye would be ciao.
Ciao.
And so what's interesting with this, again, is it's like a normal conversation, right? It's like saying hello to somebody, how are you doing, so on. It's not just, say, memorizing definitions. It's actually using those things inside the context of something that seems relatable. A lot of language learning programs don't do that. A lot of them focus on learning like word spaghetti and throwing it together in like a random phrase, right? Which doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm not going to go through the whole lesson. A lot of it is similar to this, where it's kind of reinforcing these same concepts within this lesson. So for the sake of time, I'll show one last thing here. Let me close the lesson, and then I'll show kind of the review process. So when you're completing lessons in Babbel, everything gets stored into your vocabulary database. So on your account, you can go in here and basically see everything you've learned. So you can see the English definitions, the Spanish definitions. I can play them out.
Tú.
Right.
Ella.
Hola. Gracias.
So I can kind of hear them and get used to the pronunciation, the accent, and I can set my own knowledge level, like how I feel about these, right? I feel great about yes and you. Don't quite feel good about the pronunciation of ella, so maybe that's when I would put lower. I understand what it means, but I always have trouble saying it with the proper pronunciation. And then I can actually choose to review these. So let's say I do review now, and they give me a couple options. So I can do writing in flashcards. I thought there was a third option. Hold on one second. Unless they just changed something. Oh, there we go. Review these items, sorry. So I can do writing, flashcards, or kind of speaking, right? So I can kind of focus on the written and the reading part of it if that's what I'm feeling weak on, or maybe I want to reinforce my pronunciation, my listening, I can do speaking, or maybe I'm just looking to memorize, like maybe I'm cramming for a test coming up and I just need to memorize stuff real quick. I can go flashcards. So I'll do flashcards real quick just to kind of show it. And so we see kind of a similar interface, right? We see an image, we get the word, and then we have to, hello is going to be hola, right? So I click this, hola. Reveals it's hola, I got it right, yes. Yes is going to be sí.
Sí.
Thank you is gracias.
Gracias.
And again, the person keeps talking to
Ciao.
us, is ciao, yes. I is yo.
Yo.
You is tú.
Tú.
He is él.
Él.
She is ella.
Ella.
And then you're good. So you can choose specifically what words you want to reinforce, because as you go through these, you're going to end up with like a huge list of stuff in your vocabulary, right? So maybe there's some that you don't feel so good about. Those are the ones you would select and try to review on your own. So with that, I'll kind of move onwards for the sake of time here. But that's kind of the overview of pretty much what Babbel looks like and kind of how it works. Pathways to Mastery, I already kind of spoke about this. Each of your lessons each of your languages has these numerous different lessons in there, and the idea is to kind of, through memorization as well as putting things in the context of conversation in real life situations, you're going to hopefully learn things in an effective way. So the reason Babbel is effective, I've talked a lot about this already, but the content is relevant. So like you saw with the conversation aspect, there's things in there that it's something I would actually say to somebody, right? Like if I was visiting somebody and I was having a conversation, I might actually have that interaction. How are you doing? Oh, this is my wife. I'm doing great, etc. The lessons are voiced by native speakers, like I said. So this really helps with the pronunciation and listening aspects and being able to learn that with the language. Speech recognition will help you reinforce that. So it is listening for you, trying to mimic the accent and the pronunciation as well as you can. The review sessions with the vocabulary will help you if you're feeling weak or strong with if you're feeling weak with certain words. You can go in there and kind of, reiterate those things and really bang them into your head better. The lessons are only about 10 to 15 minutes each, which is actually a big deal. Most linguistic studies have basically found that you can essentially learn a new language with only about 40 minutes a day of learning. And so having things split into 10, 15 minutes lessons makes things really simple. You can do maybe 2 or 3 lessons in a day and you're good. And it's also flexible. You know, maybe you're a busy person. You don't have like huge blocks of time to dedicate to something. Well, you only need to find 10 to 15 minutes, even if it's like before you go to bed, right? So you can fit that into busy schedules. And it's highly portable. Like I said, you can get this on your Chromebook, your Linux box, your Mac, your PC, your iPhone, your Android. You can probably even get it on a smart TV if you have a browser, although I don't know why you would want to do that. So why do educators choose Babbel? Well, one of the big things is it's affordable. It's a really cheap solution compared to a lot of language learning programs. It is available 24/7 and it's highly portable, which is really big for schools where you're going to have a lot of students who have a ton of different devices. You might have students that don't even have a desktop computer at home. They only have a mobile device. That's fine. They can still use the software. You might have students that have Chromebooks. That's fine. They can use the software. You might have a student that has a computer from 1998. If they can access the website, they can use the software. All that progress is synced from the synced to your account. So any device you run it on, you're going to be able to pick up where you left off. And you can use Babbel for all your language trends we talked about earlier. So you have immersive learning. You can use Babbel to kind of maybe provide homework or supplement your coursework in some way. Blended learning and distance learning, it's really effective because for when your students are at home doing the distance learning side of it, you can use it to basically provide them lessons and, you know, tell them do this lesson here and, you know, take this test or whatever. One last note is that there is this kind of a new thing we found out recently. There's a license management system for Babbel that's in beta stages, looking to be pushed out real soon. That will handle centralized solution for licensing. So with this approach, you use invitations instead of license codes. So basically you would have, like as a school, you might have your IT handling a bunch of invitations for Babbel. And then when your students need them, they speak to IT. IT gives them an invitation code. They create their account with it. They're able to use the program. Again, this is beta stages, but people who are looking to get Babbel currently, you can talk to our people about this and request it and make use of it currently. There are new features being implemented and it's constantly being developed on. It is beta, so we're excited about that though. It should be an interesting solution for tracking licenses and things like that. So for people who are on the webinar today, we do have this offer to get a free personal copy so that you can try Babbel out for free and see if you like it, see if it's going to work for you in your class and what you're doing at your school. So to actually get a copy, you'll need to email marketing@studica.com. So it's this red text down here. Hopefully everybody can read that. When you email us, put in the subject line Bab free, all caps. And basically we'll get back to you with instructions on how you can get the free 6-month personal license. So again, this is for people who attended today. If you do this, we will get back to you. We'll give you the free personal license that you can use for 6 months completely, however you want to use it, and basically see if you like Babbel and see if it's going to work for you. And yeah, so again, email marketing@studica.com. Bab free is your subject line, all caps, and that's all you really need to do. So at that point, I'll open it up to questions. I'm not going to open the mics again because of feedback issues, but if you do have questions, use the chat feature on Join Me. Again, at the top of your screen, I think you're going to have the Join Me bar, and you're going to see the little chat bubble icon, second button on the left. If you click on that, you'll be able to chat with us in the chat and ask any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Can't guarantee I have an answer for every question, but I'll hopefully be able to point you in the right direction or get somebody at our company to get in touch with you about the question. So again, if you have questions, feel free to use that chat feature. I'll wait around for about a minute or so, see if I get any. Lynn asks, is this a half off a yearly subscription or actually just 6 months free? Lynn, to my knowledge, it's legit 6 months free. Yeah, Christy confirmed that. Yeah, so you'll be able to use it full featured for 6 months. And while I wait for questions, I'll leave those instructions up in case anybody missed them. How can Babbel adapt? Luis says, how can Babbel adapt to my curricula and how can I assess my students? I mean, to my knowledge, Babbel would mostly be used to supplement your curricula. So if you already have some kind of curriculum in place, you would use it as a way of basically reinforcing what you already have. I don't know if, and Christy might know this better than I do, I don't know if Babbel directly has like some kind of specific curriculum they provide. How you can assess your students, I believe the license management system is taking care of that, the thing that's in beta stages currently, but I don't have full 100% information about that system at the moment, so I don't want to promise you something that may or may not be true. But I do know that the feature is either in the works or currently being deployed. Yeah, and that's definitely something we can, some of our people can try and ask Babbel directly and get a more clear response for you. Like I said, I just don't want to give you bad information. So how much will Babbel cost after the 6 month? So to be clear, the 6 month license that you're getting from this webinar is a personal license for you that lasts for 6 months, so you can use it. They will not charge you, to my knowledge, they're not going to charge you like on month 7. It's just that your license expires on the 6th month. So if you wanted more, if you wanted to keep using Babbel, you would basically purchase some licenses at that point through like us, for instance, through Studica. Our pricing is on our website, www.studica.com. And if you just look for Babbel on the search bar, you should be able to see all of the pricing. And if you have questions specifically about the pricing, I would highly recommend contacting our... Oh, I forgot about this slide, sorry. Yeah, I'd highly recommend contacting sales@studica.com. Our sales reps will be more than happy to work with you and discuss pricing options and what might work for your school. So yeah, I forgot to talk about this slide real quick. If you need to contact us for some reason or you want to talk to a sales rep about pricing, things like that, you can email them at sales@studica.com. Basically ask them about Babbel. Somebody will get in touch with you. If you want to call us by the phone, we do have an 800 number, 888-561-7521. Hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time, so that is the East Coast. And additionally, we will also send a follow-up email after the webinar to all of you that will contain a recording of this webinar as well as some extra information. I should probably put this slide before the question slide. Yeah, so if anybody has any other questions, I'll wait here for another 30 seconds, minute or so, see if I get anything else. All right, Luis says, can you make a webinar to my 8th grade students? Well, I mean, like for your students to watch, I would recommend, I mean, in general, I'm recording this webinar and you'll get a copy of that recording. So if you need to show it to anybody, you can do that. But in general, if you're asking me to make a whole new webinar, I can't do that, unfortunately. All right. Well, I'm not getting any more questions. Like, if you do have questions that come up afterwards, something you maybe forgot to ask or that pops in your head later, like I said, just take note of our contact information here and feel free to contact us. Our people will be more than happy to tell you about it and help you out. Thank you for the kind words, Lynn. I do appreciate that. I hope it was informational. Hopefully maybe you learned something. That's kind of what I aim for with my webinars. I'll go ahead and close it out. And again, if you want to contact us afterwards, feel free to do so. And thank you all for attending, and hope you all have a great day, great week, great weekend. Thank you.